Hello everyone and welcome back to Canadian King Coins. In today's video I'll be explaining the story behind Canada's famous 1936 dot coinage and why they're so rare today. Our story starts with King George V, who became king after the death of his father, King Edward VII, on May 6, 1910. After King Edward VII's short reign, the reign of King George V was relatively long and encompassed many historical events that would change the empire and the world forever. The First World War, the territorial peak of the British Empire, the Irish War of Independence, and the rise of Nazism in Europe, just to name a few. But in early 1936, all that changed. King George V was not a healthy man in his later years, and by January 1936 he couldn't even leave his bedroom. On January 20th, 1936, the king died, and his first son, the Prince of Wales, instantly became King Edward VIII. As had always been tradition, coins featuring the deceased monarch's portrait would continue to be produced for the rest of the year 1936, to give the various mints across the empire time to approve and engrave a new portrait and prepare new dies. This gave mints plenty of time to get Edward VIII's coinage ready for the beginning of 1937, but anyone familiar with royal history already knows how this turns out. King Edward VIII did not enjoy conforming to the traditions of being king, and due to various reasons, mainly his intent on marrying a twice-divorced American, Wallis Simpson, he decided to abdicate the throne on December 11, 1936. Since Edward had no children, his younger brother, the Duke of York, became King George VI, who we all know and love. But this posed a big problem for mints across the empire. They had just spent the last 10 months preparing the 1937 coins for Edward VIII, and now they had to start from scratch for the coins for George VI with only 20 days left in the year. They knew they weren't going to be able to finish in time. Canada had taken the opportunity of new obverses for 1937 to completely redesign the reverses of all denominations, except the dollar. So by the time Edward abdicated, the reverse dies were all complete, and they only needed the new obverses featuring George VI to start producing 1937 coins. Anticipating that the George VI coinage wouldn't be ready in time to satisfy the coinage demand of 1937, they decided to continue issuing George V 1936 coins into 1937. The only difference being that they would add a tiny dot at the bottom of the reverse designs to denote that they were actually struck in 1937. 679,000 pennies, 191,000 dimes, and 153,000 quarters were said to have been struck as part of this emergency issue of 1936 dated coins. But what the mint didn't expect was how quickly the new obverse dies would be completed and how low the demand would be for new coins in early 1937. Because of this, none of the 1936 dot pennies or dimes ever entered circulation, but a limited amount of the quarters did. Once the 1937 dated George VI coins entered production, almost all the remaining 1936 dot coins were melted down. 3 specimen pennies and 5 specimen dimes survived along with an unknown amount of quarters. Circulated 1936 dot quarters can be purchased for around $40 today, but the pennies and dimes are strictly for the richest of coin collectors. The 1937 dated coins with George VI on the obverse and the all-new reverse designs entered circulation in the spring, and production at the mint returned to normal. 1937 even ended up being a high mintage year. In 1939, Canada and the rest of the empire entered the Second World War, and this whole mess was largely forgotten until decades later when examples of the dot coinage began to surface and sell in auctions for record numbers. Although no coins were ever put into circulation anywhere with Edward VIII's portrait on them, many pattern pieces were created, and coins with no portrait and only his name were produced in some colonies. This is a 1936 penny from West Africa. So there you have it, the history behind those tiny dots on Canada's famous 1936 coins, and how it relates to the short and eventful reign of King Edward VIII. If you enjoyed this video and like to see more like it in the future, consider subscribing, or check out some of the other videos on my channel. And as always, have a great day.